The main reason we're here tonight, obviously, is to see Irene, one of my great friends now that we had met just last year, and I got to hear her speak, and it had a profound impact on my heart. But the reason it did is because I really chose to not just listen, but to really put myself in her shoes. So to really try to listen with an open heart. And someone just told me earlier today that there's a statistic that every day we're losing about 1,000 plus people that were involved with World War II. So to be here tonight, to see a live witness is truly an honor, and I'm humbled to be here. Irene will be here after the talk, and she'll have a Q&A session at the end of her presentation, but she'll also be out in the narthex with her book. So please do stop by, if not to get one of those, but to shake her hand and give her a hug. So without further ado, I want to welcome Miss Irene Miller to share her story with you all tonight.
Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful church. I don't know how much you are aware of the events of the Holocaust, but even if you heard it, I will repeat it anyway, that only 10% of Jewish children in Europe survived the Holocaust. Among the 1.5 million of people, Jews, that were killed were 1.5 million of children. Each of us survived in a different way. Of course, I can tell you only about my survival journey, but in a way, those of us fortunate to be left alive have to become also the voice of the children not here to tell their story. I was born in Warsaw, the capital of Poland. This is what I looked like when it all started. I was about 5 years old. My immediate family, and I need Kevin to click the next, my immediate family was made up of 4. Here is my sister, 5 years my senior. She is here 8, and I am 3, and our parents. The next one, please. But we had a large extended family in Warsaw made up of 60 or 70 people. My mother was one of 12 children, and 8 of her siblings lived in Warsaw with their families. When the Nazis attacked Poland, Warsaw was under siege for a few weeks. Day and night, the bombs were falling. We lived on the top floor of an apartment building, which was the most vulnerable place because bombs were falling through the roof, ceilings, and into the home. So with the cooperation of friends who lived on the second floor, we moved in with them. But even there, it wasn't safe from the bombs. A bomb fell into the apartment one night, exploded by the door, leaving the only way out is through the window. My father, who was a very tall man, knocked out the window and jumped, and he said we had to quickly follow him before the whole place gets engulfed in flames. When my turn came, I stood on the windowsill and looked down. It seemed so far down. I was so scared I couldn't move. My mother pushed me out the window. Somehow, my father did not catch me. I fell in a pile of glass, cutting my arms and legs. When the family was down, my mother carried me to a bomb shelter, and there she was sitting and pulling out shards of glass out of my limbs. This running to bomb shelters occurred over and over, particularly at night. At some point, we lost the water. A bomb severed the water pipe, and we were left without any. And the only way we could obtain at least drinking water is running down the street where there was a functional hose. I remember exactly where I was when the Nazis entered Warsaw. I was standing in our own apartment. I don't remember if it was the 5th or 6th floor, looking out the windows. I was too high up to see the faces of the Nazi soldiers, but they were marching, filling the width of the street. But strangely, I could see the reflection of the shining boots pounding on the pavement. You know how many years had passed since the war ended, yet there are still some sounds, some smells to which I react emotionally. One such sound are low-flying planes, another one a rhythmic pounding on a hard surface. I hear those and I tighten up. My parents felt that being Jewish and also very liberal, my father was the leader in the labor union, the Jewish division, that as such, they would be among the first ones to be persecuted by the Nazis. So sometimes during the winter of 1939-1940, they sold the lease to our apartment, hired a Polish guide to smuggle us across the border into the Soviet Union. As you probably know, Soviet Union borders on one side of Poland and the other side is Germany. Why to the Soviet Union? Because at that time, the Nazis were not there. Later during the war, they attacked the Soviet Union as well, but not yet in 1940. And why to smuggle us? Because the borders were closed. The Soviets would not allow anyone to enter. I remember the last leg of that journey. It was in the middle of the night. We were sitting inside a wagon of hay, the hay over our faces, over our heads, and over all that old blanket. We were wearing layers and layers of clothing to keep warm and also to minimize on the luggage. And the blanket covered it all so that when should a Nazi soldier come across that wagon at night, he would not recognize that there are people in it. At some point, this guide stopped. He said we had crossed the border and pointed where we should take a train in the direction to where my parents were headed, to a city called Bialystok. The area he left us in was surrounded by tall trees. You couldn't see what's beyond that. We huddled up for the rest of the night, and when we woke up in the morning and left that area, we saw a field with thousands of people laying on the snow, leaning against bags, suitcases. This man did not take us across the border. He left us on the no man's land. And for those who don't know what's a no man's land, it's a territory between two countries, doesn't belong neither to one nor to the other. It's supposed to be neutral land. My parents did not want to go back to Warsaw from where they escaped, and they even didn't have a place to go to because we no longer had an apartment. My mother spread a blanket over the snow. People were sitting very close, one next to the other. She pulled out also a down comforter, commonly used in winter in Europe. And this place, under the open sky, became my home for about 6 weeks. My mother kept on repeating over and over, move, move. If you move, you are not going to be that cold. I moved as much as I could. And when I couldn't anymore, I was too cold or too tired, I would crawl under the covers. During all that time, I did not change nor take off the clothes I came in. I remember vividly 2 incidents from the no man's land. I woke up one night and there was a stranger next to me under the covers. I tried to push him out, but apparently I fell asleep. And when I woke up, the man was dead. People were dying from diseases, from starvation, from exposure. and the peasant women from nearby villages who would come and sell bread or boiled potatoes for exorbitant prices were now bringing also shovels, and the young men buried the dead in shallow graves. The other situation, I was standing with my mother by a fire. There were woods in the area. People were making fires to warm themselves and also to melt the snow for drinking because there was no other way of obtaining fluid. And as I stood there, a young woman approached, holding a baby in her arms wrapped in blankets. People assumed she wanted to warm herself and the infant, and they parted, letting her approach close to the fire. But as she got close to the gathering, a man looked into her arms and said, "Lady, your baby doesn't need warming anymore." The baby was dead. He took the dead baby out of the mother's arms and proceeded where the soldiers were guarding the borders, and the crowd around the fire followed him. The man laid that infant in front of one of the guards, and the crowd started shouting, "Let us in, let us in. See, we are dying one by one." And that guard didn't say anything, just kicked that baby right back into the crowd. And I'm sure, like all others, it was buried. My parents apparently concluded that they have to take some drastic steps because we would die as so many others there. There seemed to be no end to this waiting. One night, my father smuggled himself across the border. On the Soviet side, we had a young cousin of mine, an 18-year-old young man who had been there for a while and familiar with how things were going on. And with the help of that cousin, my father bribed a Soviet official to give him a letter permitting the family to cross the border. But when he returned and handed that letter to the chief guard, it said he may take his children, but said nothing about my mom, and the guards would not let her go. My parents apparently concluded that my father should take my sister and myself to safety and see thereafter what he can do to save mother. The guards waited until late in the day to let us go. We walked a whole night in the forest, and for me it was torture because in the stay in the no man's land, my feet got frostbitten. I had open wounds, and I was unable to wear my shoes, and my mother tore some garments and wrapped my feet in rags, and this is how I was walking around. My father tried to carry me a little because he had a large bag alternated, but it was not an easy night. Eventually, we ended up in that city, Bialystok, where my parents were headed. I don't know who and how arranged that, but there were clusters of Jews around that city. We ended up in one such cluster. It was a wooded area with a lot of scattered little cabins. This must have been at one time the property of a wealthy landlord, and those cabins were for his workers. No furniture, bare floors, but after being for 6 weeks on the no man's land outdoors in the winter, to lay on a wooden floor with a roof over my head, I probably felt like a queen in a palace. My father had no more money left, and at that time, travel in the Soviet Union was forbidden anyway. Only those who were big dignitaries or had a lot of money to bribe an official would be able to get a ticket and a permission to go any place. So my dad tried to get to the no man's land on rooftops of trains. He was caught by the police, put in jail for a while, let out, and kept on repeating it over and over. During all the time when our father was gone, my sister and I were left alone. Here and there, some thoughtful person offered us a cooked meal, but I really don't remember what and how we ate beside that. Eventually, our father made it to the no man's land, but by the time he got there, no one was there. He was describing seeing all broken suitcases, a little torn garment, just here and there indications that at some point people were there. For a little girl to think that she will never again see her mom was a very difficult thing to understand, but even more difficult to accept. Our father found some kind of a work in the city, was commuting daily. My sister and I were left alone. She became my little mama. We did together whatever was necessary, quote, domestic stuff. I remember one day we were standing over a basin, propped up on a very low stool, trying to do the family laundry. I, a 5-year-old kid, what did I know about doing laundry? I spilled it on myself, on the floor. My knuckles got bloody trying to use the washboard. My sister was angry. I was upset with her. Amidst of all that tension, the door of the cabin opened, and our mother walked in. I don't remember whether she took off her coat first or not, but she stripped me nude right there and put me into that basin with the laundry. Apparently, I was such a dirty little kid that I needed scrubbing more than whatever we had there to launder. Not until I was a young adult did I hear from my mother how she found her way to us. The Nazis took all the people, put them on trains in direction to Poland and Germany. The trains were standing in the fields for days and days. Periodically, they would let everyone out under the train to relieve themselves. My mother sensing that that journey will not come to a good ending, one such evening when they let them out, she escaped, found her way back to Warsaw, and with the financial help of one of her sisters, joined another group with a smuggler to take them across the border, and this one did. Well, you can imagine what a joy it was to see my mother. It didn't matter that there were a few families to one room, it was crowded, we were on the floor, we were together, and we were not hungry anymore because our father found some kind of a work in the city, and whatever he was earning was sufficient to feed us. But the joy did not last for very long. We started hearing that Soviet soldiers were coming in the middle of the night, taking away the young men, and no one knew what happened to them thereafter. One day there was a rumor that our cluster was scheduled for a raid, so my mother took the train to the city where my dad worked to warn him not to come back until he hears from her. But she missed the last train coming back to us. And that night, when my sister and I were alone, Soviet soldiers kicked in the door of the cabins. They said, "Get your stuff." They gave us a few minutes. They marched us to a train station, a long line of cattle cars, and they would shove in as many people as they could in each of those cars. My sister and I cried and screamed that we are not going to go without our parents. I was so scared what will happen if they shove us there in. When the platform was almost empty of people, we saw from a distance a small truck and our parents on it. I was so overjoyed to see them that I never found out how they learned about the raid, how they found transportation. The main thing, they were there. And as soon as they arrived, they shoved us in one of those kettle cars. So many people in each of them that there was no room to stretch yourself on the floor. And of course, there was nothing but bare floors because this was meant for transportations of cows, horses, and so on. There were two heavy sliding doors that would pull together to close the car. And across on the outside, a heavy metal bar to hold the doors in place. When the doors were pulled, closed, it was so dark you could hardly see. The only light was that which was coming between the cracks of the boards. Once a day, the soldiers walked around with buckets of soup. Everyone was given a cup of soup. On the days when we were fortunate, we got a little piece of bread with it. But most of the time, a cup of soup was the food for the day. Once or twice a day, they would let us out simultaneously, of course, under the train to relieve ourselves. You know, it doesn't take very long. You forget about all that concept of privacy. You just do what you have to do. Yes. People were getting extremely tired and, of course, very, very hungry. And everyone was anxious, not knowing why the soldiers put us in those wagons and where they are taking us. We were on that train somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, I am not sure. Through additional means of transportation, we were delivered to the Siberian taiga. Taiga is an extremely dense forest covering the northern part of Russia. Temperature in Siberia drops to 50 below. If a bird, for some reason, did not fly away on time, it would freeze to the tree like a lump of ice. If you were outside in the winter, not wearing layers and layers over your face, breathing felt like swallowing sharp objects. We did not have clothing for that kind of a climate. We were placed, a few families, to one room. Everyone had to work, including my 11-year-old sister. And everything was rationed. There was one governmental store, and people didn't go to buy what they needed. They went to see what happens to be available, because there was no such a thing as saying, I need X, Y, and Z, and you go and buy it. I did not talk to my children about my Holocaust experiences. As a matter of fact, I did not talk to anyone until a few years ago I started telling my story. There were people who worked with me for most of my life and didn't know much about my past. When you read my memoir, published by the University of Michigan, you will understand why I started telling my Holocaust story. But my youngest child, Naomi, kept on asking me, and apparently I related little bits and pieces because I found in her high school reference to two situations in Siberia. My mother sent me to the store to get the family's rations of bread. And bread did not look like that which we see in a supermarket, nicely wrapped in whatever it is. Bread was big, round, lumpy, black thing. It looked like mud and heavy like clay. And the clerk in the store would cut and weigh what is, in our case, the portion for 4 people. I was giving a large piece and Visit a very, very tiny piece. And I told Naomi that it took an enormous discipline on my part not to eat that little piece because I was very hungry. So she asked me, then how come you didn't eat it? I told her, It was bread for the whole family, and we had to wait until my mother divides it and lets us have it. But no sooner did I hand over the bread to Mama, she put the little piece in my mouth. The other thing, it was my birthday, and my mother said, let's pretend that there is no war. What kind of a present would you like for your birthday? I told her a big loaf of bread, and that I could eat as much of it as I want to. And I saw tears flowing down her face. And I had no idea, what did I do wrong to make my mother cry? Yes, we were very hungry and very scared. The adults, I am sure with the best of intentions, did not talk to us, the children, of what's going on, why things are happening, why way or the other. And the less I knew, the more anxious I was becoming, because a child always tries to interpret. Yes. The only time in Siberia I remember not being hungry, we were given a very tiny plot of land, a distance from the housing area, and we planted potatoes. And my mother said, when we harvest the potatoes, we will make a meal and you can eat as many potatoes as you want to. On that day of our harvest, that store had herring. So my mother bought herring. She cut it up in little pieces, and we baked the potato in fire. I thought that baked potato and herring is the food for the kings and the queens. And if someday I become rich, I will eat potatoes and herring every day. I still like baked potatoes, but they don't taste the same way anymore. We were in Siberia either 2 or 2.5 years, and then shipped to Uzbekistan, a southern republic of the Soviet Union. I am sure that my parents felt that going south into a warm climate, life would be easier, food would be more plentiful. But while we were hungry in Siberia, we were starving in Uzbekistan. They placed us in a very poor farming village. My parents were not given any land to cultivate, and there was no way of finding work. My father walked from farmer to farmer, looking for work, willing to do anything in exchange of food. Once in a while, he would get a day's work, but most of the time, not. There were periods of time that we lived on boiled grass and leaves. My mother would go into the field, pick up anything green, boil it, drink it first herself, wait a little while to see if she doesn't get sick from it. And if she was okay, she gave it to us as well. There was a stretch of time that we lived on broiled onions. Some farmer must have had a good crop of onions, and in exchange for some of my mother's clothing, she got a bag of onions. Strangely how the memory works. There are some things that I could not remember what happened a week ago, but I can still see that surrounding big rocks that my father made with some branches inside, made a fire. And we were sitting around, everyone holding an onion on a stick and broiling it. We all came down with malaria, a devastating disease. If you don't die from it, you are so weakened that I, after recovering from malaria, had difficulty walking. There were some Jews in Uzbekistan from Poland. I don't know who they were and how they were able to do it, but they set up orphanages for Jewish children from Poland and would recruit not just orphans, but any Jewish child from Poland. I am sure it was an attempt of saving the children from dying of starvation. One day, a man came to the village we lived in, talked to our parents. The next day, he showed up with a horse and buggy. Our mother told us that we'll go to a place where there will be other children, there will be a school, and food will be more available, and they, our parents, will visit as often as they could. I don't remember putting up any resistance. We went with that man what seemed to me like for days, until we came to that orphanage. The orphanage was housed in a larger village than the one from which we left. Basically, it was contained in one room. There was one large room from one end of the wall to the next. Girls were laying tightly on boards, covered with old blankets, and their heads totally shaved. You remember that first picture of me you saw with long braids? They shaved my head fully. Across the room, the same arrangement for boys, and everyone fully shaved. The caregivers shaved the children's heads because the sanitary conditions were horrible. I don't remember where and when I was able to take a bath or a shower. They feared that in those sanitary conditions, the children will come down with lice that spread diseases, and apparently lice nestle in hair. Well, we were about 100 bald-headed kids, and did we all have lice crawling all over. It is such a disgusting feeling, such a disturbing feeling. You have that constant itch and burning of the skin that you are ready to rip it off. A few months after entering the orphanage, my father died. There was an epidemic of dysentery in the village where my parents lived. There was no physician there, no pharmacy. My mother walked the whole night to another location in search of penicillin. I don't know whether she obtained it or not, but when she returned, my father was dead, buried in a communal grave. She didn't even know in which one. The war ended in 1945, but I stayed in that orphanage till 1946. I don't know exactly what was the reason that the orphanage was not able to return sooner. During the years of the orphanage, there was still severe food deprivations. And we worked in all kinds of settings. I don't remember how old I was when I picked cotton or worked in silk farms with silkworms and so on, so that the orphanage can have something to feed us with. During all the years of the Holocaust, extreme hunger had been a daily part of my life. And of course, there was a lot of loneliness because I spent years in orphanages, a lot of anxiety. But I am told that I did not cry, and I never complained. A child learns quickly on that if complaining will not bring any results, they don't do it. And I never thought of myself that I am poor or poor me. No, I knew I was very hungry, but I assumed everyone around me was hungry as well. I tried to do everything I could to study whatever I was able to. I was always a very curious child, wanting to know, asking an awful lot of questions. But as you can understand, The possibilities for getting an education during those years were extremely, extremely poor. I learned how to read myself when I was quite young. Polish, because Polish was my childhood language. But also I learned while in the Soviet Union Russian, and any piece of paper with print I could get hold of, I would read. My home here in West Bloomfield was destroyed by a tornado in 1975. Most of my belongings scattered and gone. About 2-3 years ago, I was looking for a book which I thought survived the tornado. And to my amazement, in that book, I found a notebook of poems from the orphanage. This was the only place in my poems. I had stacks of them, but this one survived. This was the only place where I was expressing my feelings. There was a tree near that orphanage, that it was known that it was my tree. This is, I would sit and write. Very, very small letters, because paper was precious and unavailable. You can imagine what the paper looks like over all those years. It was so yellow that I was afraid to pick it up. It might crumble in my hand, but it didn't. And reading some of those poems now, I am amazed, because nothing there would indicate that this had been written by a child. It so happens that my command of the Polish language was very, very good for a child, so the language itself would not indicate that this was written by a child. But also the topic, nothing cute, nothing funny, just expressing longing for normalcy, how wonderful it would be to live in a small place with my family and not 100 kids in one room. How wonderful it would be to attend a school and not to be hungry. And to return to Poland. Poland to me was the most wonderful place in the world. Of course, Poland to me was that which I remembered, the very little girl, surrounded by an immediate and extended loving family. But when I returned to Poland in 1946, nothing of what I hoped for, dreamt about, or envisioned became reality. First of all, I spent another 4 or 5 years in orphanages in Krakow. Anti-Semitism was still raging in Poland. There were many Jews who had been killed by Polish people after the war, particularly in small towns. The very, very tiny Jewish community that was left alive tried to do the best they could for us, the children who survived. We became a treasure of sorts for the small community. The orphanage I was in Poland, was set up by the Jewish community, that is, was for Jewish children, and so was the school to which I attended. Very, very small school, a few kids to a class, some classes combined. The school took us to one of the concentration camps. In the display room was a pile of shoes, men's shoes, women's shoes, little children's shoes. Shoes of those who were sent to the gas chambers to be killed. There was a huge pile of hair, long hair. Women who had long hair, they cut their hair before sending them to the gas chambers. And I understand that they used hair for various purposes. There were lamps made from human skin, soap, made from human flesh. It took me an enormous length of time before I could take a bar of soap in my hand and not think of my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I mentioned to you that my extended family in Warsaw was made up of 60 or 70 people. Not a single one of them survived. For my mother to continue living in Poland, then she felt like living on the graveyard of her family. She and my older sister, who was already married, decided that they would immigrate to Israel. I didn't want to go to Israel. I didn't know anything about Israel. I wanted to stay in Poland and study. I had almost a furious hunger for learning. But the rule in the orphanage was that when you reach age 17, you have to leave and be on your own. I did not know anyone in Poland outside of the orphanage. I didn't know anyone in the whole world outside of the orphanage. Though I did not live with my mother and my sister, they were within a distance that I could periodically take public transportation and visit with them. Apparently, they provided some emotional support which I needed because I did not have the courage to be left alone in Poland. So in 1950, I joined my mother to go to Israel. Israel was a different chapter of my life with different challenges. I didn't know anyone in Israel. I knew I would have to support myself, and I was pretty sure I would have to support my mother as well because she was a sick woman. And I did not know this language spoken in Israel. During the orphanage years in Uzbekistan, I learned Yiddish because there were many children who came from Yiddish-speaking homes. But the spoken language in Israel is Hebrew, and those are very different languages. As you can see, I survived. I don't want to leave you with the thought and the feeling, here is this poor woman who had such a tough life, because I absolutely don't think of myself that way at all. Not only am I fortunate that I survived, but to me it is more important, I am fortunate that I was able to create a life for myself that matters. I would like the next photo. This is what I looked like when I came to the United States. This is my passport photo. I was 21 years old, I was married and had a little baby and did not know a word of English. Fortunately, when I was very young, I was picking up languages rapidly. It did not take me very long. I entered the University of Cincinnati. I spent about 13 years in Cincinnati. I earned an undergraduate degree in psychology. I have a master's in social psychology and a second master's, an MBA with a major in hospital management. I had very rewarding work, including for a year, I served on an advisory committee that dealt with women, children, and drug addiction, and that was in Washington, D.C., and they would fly me in once a month for a day or two. I am now retired, and I am sure that we have people of age who could understand when I say it means and I work and I don't get paid most of the time. If I don't get paid monetarily, I do things that reward me in many other ways. I have tried all my adult life to live by the Jewish principle called in Hebrew tikkun olam. Tikkun olam literally means repairing the world, but implied in it is that we each have a responsibility to make this world a little better for everyone. How I do it is, first of all, how I relate to people in my life. I respect and appreciate it equally and fully every good human being. Doesn't matter what's their religion, doesn't matter what's the color of their skin, where they came from, what's the size of their bank book, or how many degrees they have. They're good human beings, they have my full respect. I try to use my time and my skills to enrich the life of my community as a volunteer. One of these days, I might find you at the Detroit Institute of Arts, where I'll talk to you about art and not about the Holocaust, because I am a docent there. Or you might find yourself with some legal issues in court, and the judge will say you have to go to a mediator, and it might be me, because I am a mediator in courts. I am on the board of directors of the oldest civil rights organization in the United States, the American Jewish Committee. But my most important, I wouldn't call it just activity, but passion, is to use my Holocaust experience to promote tolerance and acceptance of diversity. Because my life is an example, an extreme example of what can happen when diversity is not respected. Events like Holocaust don't happen all at once. They start in a much milder form. They start less destructive, what might appear, but they grow by increments, until they become a monster difficult to control. There were some people in Europe who recognized what Hitler was planning. There were some people who tried to object, but very, very few. If every so-called good human being would not have been a passive bystander, we would not have 6 million of innocent people killed, among them 1.5 million of little children. I have also tried all my adult life to do everything I could to promote peace. I was a member of various organizations, and in all kinds of ways I could. Peace was, for me, such an important thing. I have recent 2 experiences. I came back from Israel, where my older sister lives, and there everyone uses the word shalom. Shalom means peace, but shalom means also goodbye and hello. And I felt if everyone just can feel and do shalom in their daily life. And another time when I had the same experience, you celebrated very recently Easter. Bob, who is there, my significant other, is a Catholic. And Christmas and Easter, I go with him to church. And when everyone was reaching out, peace be with you, I felt if we could do it daily, the world might be different. And I'm not just referring to Catholics or any other religion, but if we could daily reach out, peace be with you to everyone, we wouldn't have a Holocaust happening. The University of Michigan published my memoir about 3 years ago. May I have the next slide, please? Yes. Since the publication of that book, I have been in countless number of churches, schools, universities, military, labor union, and many book discussion groups, optimist clubs, all kinds of things. And I will go any place where a group wants to hear my story and wants to learn from it. I want to tell you about a recent experience I have. As recent, what was it, 3 or 4 days ago? I was in Elgin. I didn't know that Elgin exists until the correspondence started with some schools. I spoke to 700 students in the most beautiful, they call it, theater auditorium. The reactions that I am getting now, daily emails of saying what impact it had and how many gestures of goodness are displayed. The teacher sent me one email today that choked me up and I had tears flowing, saying a group of students organized. Once they are going to have Be Good Day, and another group they are writing a positive, warm message and going to stick it on the locker of every student. And I heard before from the teacher that this was a place with a lot of bullying and tension, and I addressed myself to that. So I am a great believer in the human spirit and a great believer of what we can do. What I told you is less than the tip of the iceberg. I hope that each of one of you read the memoir that is available there. And by the way, I am told it is an inspirational reading and a page turner. Though even one of your friends here might buy 100 books, we have enough so that if you might want to inspire your friends as well. After you read the book, you will understand one other thing. Why it is such a passion for me to see that no other child in the world experiences the hunger which I did. Because hunger not only deprives the child's body, but it can also wither the soul. And the soul very often goes before the body does. I know I threw a lot of stuff at you. I took you to places. Could we have the next? And the next? This is my website. You are welcome to visit, irenemillerspeaker.com. I know I took you to places you didn't expect to go. I brought you into conditions that fortunately are so alien to your lifestyle. So take whatever time you need to gather your thoughts and ask me any questions you would like to.
All right, so anyone that has any questions, I'm just going to kind of walk around, and if you want to just put your hand up, I can bring the microphone over to you so we can make sure she can hear.
I want to thank you for sharing. I know it must have been difficult to confront your feelings, to bring them out. It seems a pattern with so many Holocaust survivors that it's later in life that they share. I want to know what you attribute your ability to overcome your circumstances.
I really don't have the answer. And you heard the question, my ability to overcome the circumstances. I believe that we each are born with certain predispositions, with certain strengths and certain limitations. I was a child always with very high energy, always what's calling, pushing the envelope, wanting to do, wanting to experience. Did this help me? Maybe, I happened to ask my son, who is a psychologist, that me being a Holocaust survivor, how did it affect raising my children? And his answer was, Mom, I never had another mother to compare. I often feel the same way. I never have another life to compare. I don't know why I was able to overcome, and my older sister who lives in Israel has been depressed chronically for most of her life. My sister, yes, she's living, and Bob and I were there, maybe 3 weeks ago, but she's in very bad shape, both physically and emotionally.
Anyone else have any? Oh, over here.
Some here.
Well, this is something to address to you, Mrs. Miller, because I
Call
think...
me Irene.
Okay, Irene. First of all, I think we are the same age, and I was born in Poland, and I do remember what the war started. Maybe not what started, because I was 1 year and 8 months, but during the war, I was living in a suburb of Warsaw, and now my family is living in Warsaw, what was left. And I just wanted to add that not only Jewish people was put into concentration camp and die, but a lot of Polish people or different nationality. My whole family in Warsaw actually was in a concentration camp. And one of my aunt was pregnant and was having baby with her, and they both died in Auschwitz. So I don't know if it's anything in your memory. I have a book, but maybe I start writing the book about the Polish people in a concentration camp and during the war, because I remember Germans was coming to my mother's house, what was 3-story house, and the people was living, and they was looking for men and arresting them and sending them right to the Auschwitz or Treblinka. So
I have great compassion for anyone who suffered. It doesn't matter what's their religion. They suffered. I have great compassion. I wrote about that, which was familiar to me. Yes. There is in the front a question. Oh.
I wondered why you came to the United States.
Oh, when I speak to high school kids, I tell them, I don't recommend that you do what I did. When I was 18, I met a man in Israel from Detroit, and I married him at 18. I tell them I am not against marriage, I am against 18. So this is how I got to the United States.
Irene, I just wondered how many children and grandchildren you have, and what are they doing now?
I will tell you about my grandchildren. When you read my book, you will find out about my children. It's difficult for me to talk about it. I have 3 grandchildren, and Two of them I saw just a few days ago, Josh and Adam. Adam just graduated from Santa Barbara University, and Josh is in Ann Arbor at U of M. And my oldest granddaughter is in North Carolina trying to find her way.
I appreciate you coming here to this church, but I was wondering, I wanted to ask you a question of faith.
Yes.
How do you feel about God?
God is a very personal feeling and a personal belief, and different people interpret it. And I am not comfortable talking about my feelings about religion. As you can sense, I respect everyone's religion, and everyone expresses it in a different way, yes. And I respect yours, of course.
Thank you.
I was wondering, how old were your children when you finally shared your story with them, and were they surprised to hear what you suffered?
How old were my children when I finally shared the story with them? I never did. Naomi, little bits and pieces, but I never talked to my children about it. I was Spielberg, whom you know as the movie producer, had set up a foundation, I think it was called Living History or something, and I was interviewed by a representative of Spielberg, and it was a few hours interview, and it is kept in a few places, universities, museums, and so on. And when it was done, and I would say maybe 10 years ago, my son asked me for a copy of it. And of course, they read my book, but I never talked to them about it.
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story with us. Toward the end of your talk, you mentioned that there were some
Excuse me, yes.
some parts of rights being taken away slowly, that the Holocaust happened gradually. What you were told as a child and afterward, do you see similarities in what's happening in the world today?
You are referring to the, okay. You know, I usually don't talk politics, but in our current political situation in our country, it is very important to remember that monstrosities of injustice don't happen all at once, and we need to recognize the seed of what can grow into a monstrosity. What I know now is only what I learned as an adult. Because as a little child, I didn't understand anything. But what I know now is all the rules that happened in Germany to begin with. The Jews were not allowed. They started off not with Jews. They started off with the handicapped. And after killing all handicapped, it was gypsies, then Jews. Well, you hear right now what was going on in Africa, that Christians are being killed and persecuted. So as long as we look at a human being and judge him or her not for who they are, but try to define them by a category. This is the beginning of injustice.
Hi, Irene, and once
Hello.
again, thank you for coming to our parish. My question is what gave you the incentive, or what made you, after all these years, decide to start speaking or talking or writing a book about your experience?
Please read the epilogue of my book, you will understand.
Okay.
But don't start off with the epilogue, start with the beginning.
Have you been back to Poland since you left?
I went back to Poland twice. First time when I back to Poland, it was not a good way for me to do it. I was then a hospital administrator, and I went with a medical group to study healthcare system in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. And I did not have any personal time, and I even served in some cases as a translator. But I went to Poland again alone about a dozen of years ago. And I stayed in Krakow. I was with a woman who was a child with me in orphanage. She was 5 years my senior, but yes. And being in Krakow was a very sentimental journey because she brought in the few people that were left that were children with me after the war. But so I went to Krakow where I lived after the war, and I went to Warsaw. Warsaw was extremely painful experience. Nothing there would ever validate that I was ever a child. The neighborhood into which where I was born was the ghetto, and everything was leveled. You just see little stones of here, this is where they shipped the people, this is what this happened, this is what that happened, yes. Down there.
Do you ever feel like
Would you speak louder, please?
Yeah, sorry, I have a cold.
Okay.
Do you ever feel like you missed out on childhood because of the war and being in an
Well,
orphanage
that's a
all
very
your life?
good question coming from a child. I think I see a child. You know, I start when I was writing the book, the person who represented the university, because the university publishes, said, people want to know what you feel, how do you feel about it, what's your life, and this and that. I never gave it a thought of what I miss and how I felt about the Holocaust. But thinking about it, there are two things most importantly. Of course, I stopped being a child when I was 5. So all those joys that children have, the games they play, I don't know too many games. I know some adult stuff, but no children. And the other thing is not having an extended family. When we are in great pain or in great joy, we want to share it with those who are close to us, who provide some continuity. And that the Holocaust deprived me of.
I thought I heard you say that.
There is here someone, sorry.
It's right here.
Yes, I can hear you.
I thought I heard you say that the changes that took place were just accepted. Was there no form of organized resistance?
What changes are you referring
Talking
to?
about the changes in the government and the Nazis
Oh, you mean in
toward
Germany?
people, right?
Yes. You know, I am not an expert at it, but I understand that there was not an organized resistance. There were individuals who were objecting, but no one believed that it would come to what it did. And two, Hitler was a master at propaganda.
What do you see in the youth of today that, I want to say, it concerns me in this particular culture that our youth has lost its bearings and is very self-involved and self-focused. How do you see in our culture today, in our youth, I guess what I'm trying to say, how is it, I see the people who have come from the war, and not just the survivors of the Holocaust, but even the soldiers, the greatest generation. I don't know that we could survive like you, and that our children even have what it takes as far as a moral fiber or character to be able to survive something like that.
You know,
do you have any thoughts about that?
Okay. You never know what you can survive until you are faced with it. So while our youth is not exposed in aggregate to hardship, you know, they would be much tougher if they would have to. Of course, when you have a country like ours, that there is so much wealth, and by wealth I don't mean having to be millions here and there, but comfort of living. It would be artificial to create expectations that they are tough and you can see that they can withstand whatever. But I'm a great believer that our youth, though they don't appear to project the toughness, would be able to handle if they would have to. Is there what I am a little more concerned that there is not idealism, that there is a lot of kind of a self-centeredness, but I do feel that the youth are very positive, and I have great hopes for them. But it is our responsibility, the adults, to guide them, because youth are very susceptible to ideas. So we have to expose them to positive choices. They will have others as well, but we have to expose them to positive choices. And it starts up from your home, from your church, and so on.
We have time for a few more questions if anyone has anything for Irene. Okay.
I do want you to know that I'll stay here for as long as you have questions. Once we are formally over, I'll be there where the books are, and I'll be there for as long as you have questions and want me to be there to answer.
Again,
and Kevin will be my guide when we are officially over. I will leave it up to Kevin.
Irene, thank you again, but I have had my own struggles in my own life, and I'm looking at you, and you look healthy, and you look like you take care of yourself. What makes you get up in the morning and put one foot in front of the other? What drives you to continue, I guess, to live?
You know, today it so happens that's a little more difficult for me to put one in front of the other because I had yesterday leg surgery. And one of your well-known surgeons, I don't know if he is here or not, did it. But I look at life as half full. I get up in the morning, I start my day with 4 miles of vigorous walking, and the world looks good. And I try to find something positive and something beautiful in every situation. I don't need much to feel that my heart is full. You know, and little things, and I'm not talking, I don't do it. When I go to a supermarket, and yes, you can see that I don't overeat too much, a little bit maybe, not too much. But when I go to a supermarket and see all that plenty on the shelves, and I can buy anything I want to eat, I said, take a look what a fortunate woman I am. I meet with friends, and I see what a fortunate woman I am to have such good friends. I try. Is it maybe a special gift I have to appreciate the little things in life? I don't know, but I do. And when I got that email from the teachers that the children did so and so, and it so happens they wrote for a special grant they called Distinguished Speaker Award and compensated me very well, and I used most of it to support organization to alleviate hunger. I figured, take a look how fortunate I am that I can have an impact on young people. You know, we have to learn to see the good in almost every situation. I am grateful that I have an opportunity to talk to you people. So, I don't know. And when I eat an ice cream cone, I thought, oh, am I not lucky?
We have time for one more question if anybody has anything. Oh.
Hi, Irene. Thank you
Hello.
for what you said tonight. It was an awesome story. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your mom, because it just seems to me that the life you described before you were 5 years old, you were surrounded by so many family members, and your mom lost a lot. So how did she get through it?
My mother had a tough life. She was a beautiful woman, and I'm not referring just what she looked like. She was also physically attractive, but she was a great believer in social justice. Both my parents were great, not just believer, but sacrificed a lot, and you will read in the book too, for social justice. Unfortunately, she died. She was still a young woman in her 50s. And then she had to face living in Israel, which was very tough. Her conditions were very, very difficult. I cannot tell you more how it was for her. You know, I am, as I mentioned here indirectly, I am a great believer that we each have more potential than we recognize. And when I speak in schools where the children come from difficult neighborhoods, I tell them that I tried, or not just difficult neighborhoods. I spoke 2 years ago, I don't remember what's called, north of Beale City is a whole campus of incarcerated teenagers. And I tried to convey to them that there is power within them to overcome any difficulties and create a life for themselves that is constructive. And I often use myself as an example, saying, take a look. If I, with all the difficulties that I have in my childhood and so on, and not just that, I came to one country without a language, I came to another country without a language, and as you can see, I can talk with you. I say, if I could do it, imagine the potential you have. So I am a great believer that people have more strengths than they realize it. Yes.
Okay. Just a quick show of hands. Who was inspired tonight by Irene's message? Okay. Almost everyone.
Thank you all. And by the way, if you find my book moving, interesting, or whatever you call it, inspiring, tell your friends of it. It is on Amazon available in paperback and book discussion in Kindle, and also it is available on in the Holocaust Memorial Center. And a group can always buy. I don't send out individual, but 10 or more can be bought also directly from me. And visit my website, because if I get the pictures, you'll be on it too.
Please make sure to
Thank you.
stop by her table on your way out. Give everyone one round of applause.